What's up, guys, and welcome back. Today we are tackling the task of putting the clutch and flywheel back in the motor and maybe eventually putting the motor back in the frame. Let's get into it. Alright, we were right back where we left off, and I have all the parts we're going to need to put on the engine. This is the clutch, this is the kickstart spindle, and this is some of the gearing that goes along with it. So the first thing we should probably do is get the shift mechanism all together. That way we can put our clutch basket in and all along with the other gears. Alright, so this is the shift shaft. This is what rocks back and forth using your left foot and engaging or shifting through all the gears. You're also going to need this small little piece right here that slips on to this part right here. So I'll just slip right in. Then you could slide the whole shift shaft, making there's no burrs or anything or dirt. It's all well oiled, and you can just slip it right through. Just like that. So that is what it should look like when it's installed correctly. You have the pin in this slot and this other pin in that slot, and it basically this rocks up and down and moving this ratcheting system that's in the shift drum, allowing you to shift through the gears. One thing you notice about my crankcase is that I'm missing a chunk of the case right here. Now, ideally it should not be like this, but there's still enough material it will hold this bearing in. It is starting to crack, so I feel like eventually this side of the crankcase will eventually go bad. But I'm just going to run with it right now because I'm running on a budget. But I think it will hold as long as I don't beat on it too much, but I think it'll still work. Alright, I think the next thing we're going to do is figure out this kickstart mechanism, because once that clutch basket is in, there's not going to be enough room to fit it in. So I have it in this bag right here. This is what it all looks like. It kind of has these teeth that actually work. That's how it kind of ratchets it back into place once you kick it down. There's a spring that kind of keeps tension, and then this is the spring force that will return it back once you kick it down. So the kickstart mechanism is going to go into this hole right here, putting this end in first. Oh, as I just dropped the washer. Alright, so that's what it looks like when it's all in correctly. So this spring is going to be sitting around here when it's in the right place, and you have to pull that tension until it locks into there, and that's what is able to return to kickstart once you kick it down. And there's this little collar in here that lines up with the other end of the spring, and it'll slide in on the shaft. So we have a gear on the kickstart spindle, then we have to find this other gear that sits on this shaft right here. Then that gear will be bound to the clutch basket. So we have to find this gear and install it. So this is what that gear looks like. And you got to make sure you find the correct washer that goes over on the end of the shaft. Then all you got to do is just slide the gear on and make sure it spins freely. So the next thing we can do is actually get your clutch basket and slide it over this shaft and make sure it meshes with these gears as well. So here's your clutch basket. This is the gear that it meshes with right here. Then there should also be this needle bearing that will slide over the shaft first. Then go ahead and slide over your clutch basket, making sure it gets meshed with those gears. Alright, next would be finding the two gears that go over this shaft. These are splined, and there is, I believe, a timing mark or a little notch that will help guide the gears in. These are the two gears that will be on this shaft, and they actually do have little dots as timing marks along with a notch cut out to help line up onto that shaft. So here's that little mark right there. There's one on right there. And here's that little cutout right there will line up with the shaft. And this larger one has this sleeve or extension on the back of it because there is an oil seal or rubber seal that it will sit around. So this end goes on first onto the shaft. And of course, we may have to take things off and put it back on. So we'll go ahead and just throw this on. Make sure that one's seated all the way. Throw the clutch basket back on. So now those are all meshed together and it starts moving that crank. That's where the crank power gets transferred to your clutch and also moves the transmission. So now you have to also find the bolt and washer that will screw in into the end of that shaft. So when you're tightening this bolt down, this will spin, so I suggest either getting a gear jammer, or what I'm just going to do, since I'm just using an impact, I'm just going to literally hold the other end of the crankshaft and just tighten her down. And there you go. Before installing this counter shaft, you're going to have to install this little plastic gear for the oil pump, along with the little pin that goes in here. There, the pin's in. Then that gear will go right in, and that pin will sit in that little slot that's in that gear. Now you can slide in that counter shaft. On the other side of the motor, and it should come out right there. Then there are two gears that will go into it. It'll be this guy and this guy. And again, like these two gears right here, they have a cutout for lining up and also a timing mark. So I got those two gears on. You can see these two dots are all lined up along with, and this dot should be pointing straight up. So now we can throw in the bolt and washer that goes, or the nut and washer that goes on the end of this shaft. So I got that nut and washer on, and again the same thing, I'm just going to hold the end of the crankshaft, and this is a 19 or a 3/4 nut, so just put her on and tighten her down. That's plenty. So right now we can actually spin this motor around and move on to the pulley side. We're going to install the clutch later. So this is the side where your pulley goes, or your balancer and your cam chain. Actually, first we're going to put on this other chain guide, which slides down and goes right in that slot. Then you can grab your chain, slide it in, pull it out a little bit, wrap around the end of the crankshaft, make sure everything's straightened up, and just mesh it with the gears on the bottom. Next thing you're going to do is take your pulley, make sure it's all clear of debris, and make sure on your crankshaft you have that key that the pulley will guide onto. So we're just gonna kind of start it in there. Then it would have to be basically bolted in so we can pull it tight, because it is a press fit. So I threw that nut and washer on there and just tightened it down until it sucked in this pulley. Then there's one more thing you gotta install, this little filter screen. It is both wedged and tapered, so it's a snug fit, and that will go right in this little groove right here. I'll just press in and sit nice and tight in there. And again, make sure it's all clear of debris and it won't catch anything too big. Alright, this side is all wrapped up. Now we can spin the motor around and work on the clutch. Alright, so we're back on the clutch basket, and I have all my steel and fiber clutch right here. So how I got it laid out is how it's going to go in the clutch basket. So you start with a fiber, then a steel, then fiber, steel, fiber, and just in that pattern. So we actually have to install this part on first, and then there's a washer that sits in there. and so it'll just pop in, line up with the splines. It'll make sure it spins nice and freely. Now, going one at a time, installing starting with a fiber, then a steel, then a fiber, then a steel. With all your steel and fibers installed, now you got to find this washer that fits over that. Then find this locking tab. Slide it over and line it up with one of these little aluminum grooves. Then you can take the nut and start threading it in. Then we'll snug it down a little bit, and you got to fold these metal tabs and it'll lock that nut in place. So once you tighten that nut, you can see it folded over those metal tabs, and that'll basically lock that nut in place. Before installing the pressure plate, we have to install this rod and the rod actuator. So this goes on the other side in that top bearing. I'll show you in a second. Then the rod goes all the way in, and you have to work the actuator so it comes in and out. Then on the end of that rod, there is a few washers and just this little and there you go. That's what moves your clutch. And this is where the actuator goes. It just slides into this seal and that bearing. So next would be to install the spring plate. Goes over the whole clutch like that. Then you find all your springs and your bolts, and you just go around installing them. And you're going to tighten them up in a star pattern. So you start here, then here, then here, then here, then here, then just keep going around until it's a nice snug fit. Alright, so that basically wraps up this whole side. Now we can actually get the gasket on for the clutch cover and install the clutch cover. So you're just going to find the right gasket, find the dowels, and just line it all up. On this case cover, there's a larger dowel and a rubber O-ring. Make sure that's in there, and along with your water pump shaft, so you can just slide in that, and it will spline with this gear and go in its corresponding hole. Line up the kickstart spindle, slide right on. You may have to spin the water pump shaft to get it to mesh with the gear. Then there it is. You throw all your bolts in and tighten it down. So after you have this crankcase cover all tightened up, you're basically ready to put the motor back into the frame. That's about all the time I have for this video, but I made a lot of progress. We finished the whole clutch side, you got your pulley on, and yeah, the motor's basically ready to go in the frame. And that is what we'll be doing in the next video. I will see you guys then. Take it easy, like, subscribe, see you next time.